Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Final Down NFL podcast. With me, Jim, Finn, Denver Dave, and Punk Raider here talking about the NFL boys. How are we doing?
Not too bad, not too bad.
Full house.
Yeah, Dave's back. How you doing, Dave?
Apparently.
1 week off.
Well, you had a week off before that, so you've had 2 weeks off, basically. You've had a buy and a buy and another.
Podcast.
Yeah.
He's on a holdout.
I'll be honest, I'm shaking because I'm not used to doing 2 weeks back to back. So
Yeah, the workload's getting a bit much for you, isn't it, Finn?
I'm gonna have to take a break
You're
soon.
gonna have to have a month off soon.
Pretty much.
We're in autopsy season. That means that, we went eastbound and down last week.
Eastbound and down, loaded up and trucking.
This week we're going down south and hitting the AFC and NFC South divisions. Our 5-minute timer on each team as we go through, talk about best game, worst game, and a quick autopsy on what the hell happened to them in the season that was. We're going to start in the AFC, as we should do. It's the better division. And we're going to go in order of how they finished. Sorry, Finn, but it's true.
It's
It's
3 against 1, isn't it? So
yeah, we're going to go in order of how they finished. So we're going to start with the top team in the AFC South, and that was the Houston Texans. Finished 10-7. Last season they were 3-13-1, so worst to first. No change in any of the front office. So GM, head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, all exactly the same. Best game, worst game. Well, the best game I had for them, this is easy. They won a playoff game, 45-14, over the media darling Cleveland Browns. CJ Stroud had a 3-touchdown game. Joe Flacco got pick six twice. Worst game, got a toss-up between giving the Panthers their first win of the season, 15-13, or losing 30-6 to the Jets. I'll let you guys decide that one. But talk to me, boys, about the Houston Texans. Who wants to go first about how impressive they were?
I'm quite happy to. I had the best game and the worst game matching you. With the worst game, I had Carolina because CJ Stroud only threw for 140 yards.
Yeah.
Rebounded the next week and had 470 yards. So they lost in week 8. And CJ Stroud didn't throw under 300 yards until week 13. So, losing to the Panthers cures what ails you because they were really good after that. Really simple for the Texans. At the beginning of the season, Punk and I agreed massively that it's just about progression. Boy, did we see progression.
Yeah.
With the amount of cap space we've got, now it's time to
70
go to that
million.
next level. They skipped about 5 levels this season, and well done to them because they were really good.
I think the thing to remember with the Texans is that if you get the quarterback right, it will help you out no end.
Yeah.
CJ Stroud, I waxed lyrical about him all during the season. I thought he was fantastic. He was making some plays that make veterans blush because they can't do them, Jimmy? But I think what we need to do is just temper ourselves a little bit on the Texans and not be surprised if they don't take a massive leap forward next season. We'll see this quite often. I think we did it with Jacksonville last year, didn't we, James? Some of us maybe predicted Jacksonville to go to a Super Bowl.
Not to win it.
After running, but a season after running.
Still to make it though.
So you can almost look at this Texans team as that Jacksonville team, and just I don't think they will. I don't think they'll be allowed to. I think they've got enough good players in Stingley and Stroud and Tank Dell that will just allow them to keep that level of consistency, but also maybe take that next step forward and maybe run the Ravens closer next year.
I think it's going to be, like Punk just said, we're not going to see the same strive forward that they've just had, but that's because this was them advancing years and years in 1 year, and you're not going to be able to do that back to back without making immense changes, which they're not going to do because why would they? Nothing's broken, so why'd bother fixing it? So, I mean, yeah, they're gonna still go forward next season, not to the same degree, but it won't take away from how impressive they've been this year, and I think it will continue next year. You look at the side that they've got and how fresh and how young that side is. You look at when they play, and you wouldn't look at that side and go, they're a team with rookies. They're a team that's only just sort of come together. You look at that, particularly in the playoff game. They look like they were experienced in the playoffs. They look like they've been there plenty of time. They could handle the pressure, and they just sort of threw everything that was thrown in their way throughout the season.
Mm.
For worst game, I also had both the games that you picked, but I edged towards the Jets
Okay.
because of the fact that the Jets were on a hot losing streak, and you would expect the Texans, when they were firing, to be able to dispatch them, but to be limited to only 6 points. Well,
Most teams
See,
got a
I
bad
think,
game in them.
I
Most
think,
teams
yeah,
got
but
one bad game in them.
you have to remember though, the Jets did have an elite defense. They really were a tremendously good defense last year. It's just they couldn't put any points on the board. So actually holding a rookie quarterback to 6 points doesn't surprise me that much. I think it was more surprising that the Panthers beat them, to be honest. But you know, it
Just
doesn't
with-
really matter either way.
Just
In
It's
that
with
game
last,
against the Jets, CJ Stroud did come out injured and Davis Mills went in.
Yeah.
And he was out the following week as Case Keenum. Next 2 weeks, Case Keenum and Davis Mills started the following week. So I think that's probably part of it. But losing to the Panthers might be the worst team we've ever seen.
with the last few seconds we've got, they've got 8 picks in this draft. They've got the last 2 picks. Thanks very much, Cleveland, for the Sean Crosby trade. So a first round pick 23 they're picking. They got 70 million in cap space, the 4th most. And apart from Sheldon Rankins and Dalton Schultz, not much really in terms of contracts to
Schultz
be
is re-signed.
brought up. Has he already been signed?
Yep, he's just re-signed.
Oh, excellent. Well, there you go. So nothing to worry
There we
about
go.
there. It's all smooth sailing there for Houston. Excellent. We're moving on to the second team then, the team that finished number 2 in the AFC South, and that was the Jacksonville Jaguars. 9-8 this year. They were 9-8 last year, so they're down 1 spot. There's been one change in the front office. They've changed the defensive coordinator. Ryan Nielsen is the new guy. He was the defensive coordinator for the Saints and the Falcons the last 2 seasons. Best game, worst game. Well, they beat the Bills. They swept the Colts, and I was going to put the week 1 win over Indianapolis, but I switched to the week 12 win at the Texans, 24-21. 364 passing yards from Trevor. CJ was great on the other side, but the Jags did just enough to see them through and to an 8-3 record. Then, of course, it went south. Worst game, they got waxed by the 49ers in week 10, but a lot of teams were waxed by the 49ers this year. There was a 4-game losing streak, but 3 of those were playoff teams. So in a horrific bit of irony, the lowly Titans showed up in week 18 to stop the Jags making the playoffs 28-20, and that was my worst game of the season for the Jags. Boys, let's talk about these Jaguars.
I agree with you with the worst game, week 18.
Mm-hmm.
I had the best game, shutting out the Panthers in week 17. It doesn't matter who you play, shutting out another team and embarrassing them,
The
I think
Panthers.
is a big. That it's a statement win whenever you shut someone out. So I'm always a fan of that. If you can do that, I think even if it's a 4-0 or whatever it was.
We could have shut out the Panthers.
I did
Four of
note
us.
down the
I
Panthers
did shut out the
for
Panthers.
a potential best game, but
It
It's the
was
Panthers, so I
it
was
CJ
reluctant to go
Beathard
with
at
it.
quarterback as well. So just saying. No, I think shutting out a team is a big thing. Listen, the Jags underperformed. They've got pieces. They've just franchise tagged Josh Allen. He should have stayed in Buffalo, in my opinion. No, I think they've got the markings of a good team, but their next season is defined purely by what they're doing in the draft and free agency because they've got pieces that need to perform. Doug Pedersen is very much under pressure. Simple as that.
I watched every red zone every week. I watched most of the primetime games. I don't remember watching Jacksonville and ever feeling like, oh, they're a playoff team or they're really good. They just all season long felt like a middle of the road team that would beat a few teams, would lose to some teams, and just really be a bit of a non-entity. You're right, they did have that little streak where they started winning games against decent teams, but they never seemed to carry it through. You know, it was the fact that to get into the playoffs, you have to win your last home game against a team that is bottom of your division, and you aren't able to do it. You shouldn't need motivating for a game like that, you know?
Second year running where that's happened because the year before they lost against the Colts, didn't they? At home, they got murdered by the Colts and failed to get into the playoffs.
No, they got to the
That was
playoffs
the
last
Titans.
year, didn't they?
Or was that the year before?
Yeah.
That's the Titans, yeah, you're right.
I think you're thinking about the year before, but
That's what was
Oh,
ironic.
yeah, Jacksonville just never struck me as a team that I trusted to make the playoffs at any point in the season. It always struck me like they're a decent team. They're not terrible, but you never felt confident. So I think even in the picks that last week, I picked the Titans over the Jaguars because I just never felt like Jaguars ever really had an identity of what they were. They didn't use Travis Etienne a huge amount. They asked Trevor Lawrence to win a lot of games, but didn't really have weapons around him to help him do that. So, yeah, I think this upcoming season is a really interesting one for Jacksonville because I think they need to make a jump, kind of like the Texans did this year, just to kind of keep that close. Otherwise, the Texans are just going to strangle that division again.
Now, Finn, I will let you go in 1 second. One thing I do want to say, Punk, I do disagree with you on one particular thing.
Of course you do.
About their streak halfway through the season, I distinctly remember you saying it was a fraudulent streak because it was against Atlanta, the Bills, who weren't playing well, the Colts, New Orleans, and Pittsburgh, all of which are rubbish teams. And I remember you specifically saying, "Don't."
Bills was in London,
Thanks
wasn't it,
for
as well?
Yeah, it was London.
It was a London game, so they had the luxury of already being in the.
Go on, Finn, you've
UK.
got
Yeah, I mean,
35
you-
seconds.
All right,
Sorry, Finn.
you could argue two of those are playoff teams, but I'm going to let Finn go quick. Go.
I think the thing with the Jags is we've seen it that they've got pieces. They can move the ball when they want, but whenever it really matters, they just can't get firing. And like we saw, they are playing bottom of the division to wrap it up and get into the playoffs. And Trevor Lawrence just couldn't get going, couldn't get the offense rallied. And if you can't do that in games that matter, you don't deserve to make the playoffs.
Oh, look at that beautiful ending.
I agree.
They've got 10 picks in the draft. They got 24.5 million in cap space. They need to sort out Calvin Ridley and Darius Williams as starters on contracts. But yeah, and also it's going to get harder because obviously this division is getting tougher because we're going to talk about the third team now, a team that was stymied obviously through most of the season, and that was the Indianapolis Colts. So they finished 9-8. Last season they were 4-12-1, so it's a check there. They stay in third place. No movement on the front office. So Shane Steichen is onto his second season. Jim Bob Cooter, offensive coordinator, and Gus Bradley, defensive coordinator. Best game, worst game. Did you know that the Colts took the Ravens to overtime in Baltimore and then won the game? It was back in week 3, but that was already with Gardner Minshew playing the whole game, 22-19. So I'm definitely picking that as best game of the season for them. Worst game, the week 16 loss at the Falcons was a body blow to squeaking into the playoffs. They took the lead early, then lost it and never got it back as Young Hoku kicked 5 field goals in that game to win 29-10. Let's have Finn first, shall we? Talk about the Colts, Finn. What do you reckon?
I feel for the Colts because they set everything up and obviously drafted Anthony Richardson and had everything geared up. And when he came in, it took him a little bit of time as it would as a rookie, but showed real signs of what he has and what he was going to bring to the NFL. And then obviously very quickly after had a season-ending injury. So it meant that they had to shift away from that game plan. But that being said, Gardner Minshew did exactly what you'd want as a backup QB. He came in, he's not going to set the world alight with pure talent, but he does what you want him and you need him to do in terms of going through plays and progressions, moving down the field and getting points. So I think if you consider where they were in terms of who they drafted and what they were hoping to achieve and where they ended up, I think they will actually take a look back and go, you know what, all things considered, to play the vast majority of the season with our backup QB and still massively improve on last season, they'll be proud with that.
It'd be a bloody sight worse, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had their best game as the week 1 loss in Jacksonville. Now that sounds weird, but
Because it is.
in that game they found out they drafted a star.
True.
And for me, that as a game, I mean, let's be honest, they played horrendously badly throughout the season and won games. Not one of those wins can be classed as a good game because they weren't. They were turgid and awful. That first week, Richardson came in, first ever game. He was the highest passer, highest rusher, and I'm quite surprised he wasn't the highest receiver as well on the team. Looked absolutely great, but got injured and missed the next week. I genuinely think, and that will be seen as an enormous positive. And in somewhat of a lost season, they still managed to be on the periphery of playoff. That says more about the division than it does them, though.
I said all season long that every time you watch this Colts team, they look terrible.
Yeah.
So the fact that they actually ended up with a winning record is exactly what you said, Finn. It's testament to the way that A, Minshew played, B, they were coached, and C, the way the team didn't just drop their heads when their starting quarterback went down. I'm quite excited to see what they do next season. I think a fully fit Richardson in there. I think if they can give him some more weapons at wide receiver, I know they franchise tag Pittman, haven't they?
They have.
And give him some blockers.
I think he needs blockers. Exactly.
Yeah,
Get
he
him-
needs it. Just
get him-
spend all your draft picks on the
Every
offense, you
single
know,
one.
and just build it up so that he's got depth in the line, he's got depth at receiver.
Yeah.
And just let him cook. And I think, although like I say, every time I looked at the Colts, they looked absolutely dreadful. They've definitely got something there. There's definitely something happening there. I feel much more comfortable saying the Colts will be better than the Jags next season, and we'll finish above them in that.
Yeah, I
I
think
would go.
you're right.
I would go with that.
I think
Yeah.
it'll be close. I think every single pick, just pick a lineman. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Lineman, receiver.
I don't care how many picks. If you got 15
bolster
picks, pick 15 linemen and just get the best ones, because you need to protect your biggest asset. Because the drop off, I've said numerous times, Minshew's a really, really good backup. He's not Anthony Richardson, and you need
He's
to
a
give
backup,
Richardson the best opportunity he can to succeed, and you need to keep him upright. It's as simple as that.
How much money they got, Jim?
Just over
$1 billion.
49 million. That's 8th in the league table for cap space. They got 7 picks in the draft, picking 15th in round 1. They got us out of Grover Stewart, defensive tackle, Kenny Moore, a cornerback, Rigoberto Sanchez, punter, and Michael Pittman. They've just franchise tagged. So I think they'll be able to deal with that. And bright future ahead for the Indianapolis Colts. Let's move to the other side of the spectrum then, from a bright future, and talk about the team that finished bottom of the AFC South, and that was the Tennessee Titans. 6-11 record. Last season they were 7-10. They're down 2 positions, down to the bottom of the division there. 3 changes in the front office. Only Rand Carthon, the GM, survives. New head coach in Brian Callahan, 39 years old. He was the Bengals offensive coordinator from 2019. Nick Holes is the offensive coordinator. He was the Jags pass game coordinator last year. Callahan got his first job from So Callahan got him his first coaching job as a video intern in Nebraska, is what I wanted to say there. And Denard Wilson is the defensive coordinator. He was the Ravens DB coach last year. Best game, worst game then for the Titans. Best game, that Week 18 revenge game over the Jags must have felt good. But back when the season was full of promise, the Titans beat the Bengals 27-3 in Week 4. Joe Burrow played the whole game too, so no excuses there. Worst game, they got swept by the Colts and the Texans in division. There were 2 games where the Titans only scored 3 points, another where they were held to 6. Yeah, let's go with the 26-3 beating by the Texans. The Titans just did not show up in that one at all.
I've got best game beating the Jags in Week 18 because they denied the Jags a playoff spot. So for me, that's it, and especially because it's a division rival. Their worst game. Now, bear with me for a second, all right? Their worst game is the Week 8 win against Atlanta.
Come
do you know
on.
why? Yeah, do you know why? Because it made them think that Will Levis was good, and he's not. He's bad. And that's going to set their franchise back in years. So their worst game is technically one of their best.
A win.
You figure that out yourself. You get what I mean.
See, Finn, I told you last week. This is what happens when Dave comes in. It all gets flipped around and turned upside
down. You don't know what's going to
No.
happen.
Why wasn't I
you know
looking at
what?
wins for their
You're
worst
all
game?
smiling. You're all smiling. That's the thing. That's what we're here for.
It's kind of right.
Oh, you're not wrong. That's why. You're not wrong.
Cap space, they've got 75 million at the moment.
Yep,
You know what?
third
This
best.
could be in free agency. This could be the most exciting team we see.
Well,
Genuinely.
it is the end of an era, isn't it? King Henry has walked away.
Yeah.
Daniels
on the block.
Exactly. You know, for me, I think you're right. I think whatever the Titans do in free agency, they're gonna make big splashes.
Well,
even if it's not necessarily picking up the players they need, but denying other teams access to those players.
They have 9 starters out of contract if you don't include Tannehill.
yes.
Well,
And
you wouldn't include Tannehill, let's be honest.
So I'm saying if you did, it'd be 10.
if they cut DeAndre Hopkins post June 1st, they save another 16 million. Like genuinely, they could go out and just be like a kid in a candy shop. It could be amazing. Or it could be absolute terrible turgidness. You figure it out.
But no, I mean, last season the Titans were abject at best. They beat a couple of bad teams. They beat teams they probably should have beaten at home. They were. It wasn't their home form that was their problem. It was their away form.
No, it was
I
their
think.
form, just generally.
Well, no, it wasn't. They had a better record than both Jacksonville
away
and
win.
Indianapolis at home.
Yeah.
But away, they only won one game.
Hmm.
And you can't do that in the NFL. Now, whether or not it actually has any bearing on what may happen, who knows? But if you're only winning one game away, then with that running game, it just beggars belief, to be honest. It doesn't help when your coach is dancing about on the sideline in a cowboy hat either, to be honest. But there we go. Right,
Over to
Finn,
me.
the
Yeah.
floor is yours.
Well, to be honest, it was just a season of nothing really. It was
Abject nothingness.
Yeah, is literally all there is to it. They won games and they had glimpses, but as much as they, on paper, the games say a win for the Titans, a lot of them you could make cases that they were sort of gifted wins / the opponents lost them rather than the Titans actually won the games. Dave goes on about it, and
I think you're right, but you got to remember, we're only a few years removed from them being a boring, abject team to watch, who happened to be the number one seed in the AFC. So I think it's just it's just the way they play.
Yeah, but I think you can put a lot of that down to the fact that Derrick Henry 4 years ago was just an absolute monster
just put the
truck,
team on his back.
No one, yeah, exactly,
and just did everything for
and
them.
I think the problem is they've ridden that horse as far as they can, and they kind of this year ran out of ideas. And
I remember
Will
Will
Levis was supposed to be the good idea, but he really wasn't.
Yeah, I remember someone saying he was on the way down. I remember that person being ridiculed as well.
7 picks in the draft, 3 of them aren't theirs. They got a bottom 3 defense this season, so yikes. That is the AFC South done. We can move on to the NFC South. Jesus.
Oh yay!
Strap in, boys. We're going to start with the team that won, in air quotes, that division, and that is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Finished 9-8 last season. They were 8-9. They stay in first place in the division. The only change in the front office came offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. He was defensive coordinator for Kentucky last year and the Rams the year before that. But otherwise, Todd Bowles is still the head coach. Jason Licht is the GM. Casey Rogers and Larry Foote, the co-defensive coordinators. Best game, worst game. The 9 wins came mostly against weak teams, but there was a week 15 win in Green Bay, 34-20. Baker threw for 381 yards and 4 touchdowns in that one. But they won a playoff game against the Eagles, who had made it to the Super Bowl the year before. Doesn't matter, they were dead on their feet. The Bucs still buried them 32-9. Worst game for me, I'm taking the week 17 loss at home to the Saints. The Bucs were on a 4-game winning streak. They did nothing against the division rival. Down 20-0 in the fourth quarter, it ended 23-13. But it was shocking. Talk to me about the Yucks.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you just said, I've got nothing else to add. Baker Mayfield looked great. Defense looked good. I think they're a solid middle of the road, lower playoff team. I think they're exactly what you've said they are. Nothing else to add.
I agree with both best and worst game that you came up with. I think for for a lot of the season, it was their defense that saved them, and they've got pieces there that do make it difficult for the opponents to get the ball and score, and that's what kept them in it, because you get rid of them, the offense isn't doing enough to blow away teams. Yes, they put points on the board, but you're not watching them each week and going, wow, this is an offense masterclass. We need to take a leaf out of their book because this is how you play football. They do enough to get by and to get points on the board, but they also don't have to worry as much because they know the defense can go out and stop the ball if they need to. So I think it was thanks to the defense that they managed to win this division. But even then, it's the division's filled with so much talent.
the stats do prove you out as well there, Finn. The defense gave from the 13th fewest to the 7th fewest in points allowed, but they were still 32nd in points gained. So yeah, the defense definitely stepped up. They were still a half decent team this season. Don't get it wrong.
Let's be honest, Baker played twice as well as any of us were expecting at the start of the season.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the fact that
Twice
he
as
actually
long.
lasted the whole season
Yeah.
was a miracle in and of itself. And even in that playoff loss to the Lions, they weren't out of the game at any point. They were feisty for a good portion of that game.
Great game.
So I think Tappan's one of those kind of weird teams in that they definitely have pieces, like you said, Finn. They've got a defense. They've got Mike Evans. They've just re-signed Mike Evans. 2
years, 52 million, 35 guaranteed. It's a big deal.
Yeah, I think they need to just find that quarterback that can lead them on. Baker obviously is a free agent. Whether he goes back or not, I don't know. I expect he probably will, to be honest, because I think he'll be settled. I think Tampa will think, why throw the baby and the bathwater out? He kind of proved it in his 1 year prove it deal. So yeah, why not? I get the feeling they can be better.
Well, they won a Super Bowl recently, so yeah, you're right. They could be better.
Yeah, no. But when you look at the turnover of team, I think they really need a running back, a real good bell cow running back, and I think they need some more help on the back end. I think the cornerbacks occasionally get a little bit flustered and so on and so forth. But look, I think Tampa will be better next year. I think in a division that's got New Orleans, Atlanta, and Carolina in it, there is no reason why they can't go and win it again next season.
Yep,
I agree about the cornerback. I was going to say center as well because Ryan Jensen had to retire for persistent knee injuries. So that's a shame. He was a very good center, but they're without him. They're going to have 8 picks, I think, in the draft. They've got a 7th round comp, so there's 8 picks for them. But both Devin White and Levante David are out of contract. They're inside linebackers.
That's fine.
Well, right. Matt Filer, the guard, and Antoine Field. They've got 21 million basically in cap space. So still got room to maneuver.
Shaq Barrett's left. They've re-signed Mike Evans and they've tagged Antoine Winfield.
Right. So the safety's done. Yeah. Whether they keep Baker or not is interesting because he's not going to go for a discount.
No, he's not going to be discounted this year, but it'll be interesting to see what they do at quarterback.
I know we're over time, but if you liken Baker Mayfield to a boyfriend, he doesn't cheat on you. He doesn't cheat on you. He's not a drinker.
No.
He's just one of those boyfriends who's a bit lazy, quite boring, spits when he talks, and he's got bad breath, but not bad enough to get rid of. He's just does enough to stay there. He buys you flowers every now and again. Although
talking your missus here. What's going on?
Oh no, she left me ages ago, mate.
He's out in himself.
We're going to move on to the team that finished second in the division, and that was the New Orleans Saints. Finished 9-8 last season. They were 7-10, so they went up 1 position. There is another change in the front office. So offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak is in. He was the 49ers pass game coordinator. He replaced Pete Carmichael Jr., who's been the Saints offensive coordinator since 2009. Joe Woods, defensive coordinator, was new in 2023. So it's just Dennis Allen and then Mickey Loomis, who's been around since the late 1800s. Best game, worst game for the Saints. There were 2 good division wins at the end of the regular season against the Bucs and the Falcons. But in week 5, the Saints actually got themselves a 34-0 shutout in New England. So I'll take that one. Worst game, not too many embarrassing losses. The Bucs' home loss in week 4, 26-9, wasn't good. A 127 passer yard performance from Derek Carr, 51 rushing yards on 11 carries from Alvin Kamara. So I'm taking that one as worst game.
I think the Saints, it was difficult to pick a hard game, worst game for the Saints, because they had a few where they were stinkers, but they didn't lose by too much.
No.
Any of the games that Derek Carr played.
I don't think their issue was Derek Carr. I think it was really difficult for Carr this season because at no point this year...
Because he's not a very good quarterback.
At no point this year did any single Saints running back get over 100 yards in any game. At all. So it was always, as an defense who's playing against him, you could just focus on protecting the pass because Alvin Kamara he's gone. You know, there was one game he was the top rusher against the Rams with 19 yards. 19 yards.
Yeah.
This is what they were dealing with. It was awful.
Well, it was was it the last game of the season or second last game of the season, and they decided to get Jamal Williams a touchdown just because
Jameis
it
Williams,
was
Jameis Winston gave him a touchdown, not
it
not
was
Dennis Allen.
someone so yeah, exactly. It's like the lunatics running the asylum in New Orleans at the minute.
It could be Jameis Winston anytime.
Look, I think Chris Olave is a fantastic player. I think Chris Olave is what they need to build that offense around. I think they need to. They won't do it this year because I doubt they've got the money to do it, but they really need to get off Carr's contract as quickly as they can. He's probably going to be, if he's still on the Raiders contract, I think he's due about 38 or 42 million this year or something. So they'll probably want to look at doing something with that. The Saints were just that up and down team last year, in that, like you say, they never looked amazing, but they never looked terrible. They still had an defensive line that did bits and certainly played up at times. But I just feel like they have one of those typical middle of the pack teams that could go either way. If they get the free agency and draft picks right, then they could take a jump of a couple of games. They need to win a couple more games, and they're in that 11 win bracket. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility they could get better. But I also just think that it's also very possible they completely implode and end up with 4 wins next season. I don't know. They just feel like a bit of a seesaw team at the minute, in that you're never quite sure what you're going to get, but they'll always chuck a bomb down the field and see what happens.
You mentioned the cap space. So next year they've got to pay him 51.5 million in cap hit, and the year after is 61.5. However, after next season, there's an out in his contract where they can cut him for only 28 million dead cap.
That's the one.
There you go. Plan in place.
Come on, Finn, any thoughts on the Saints?
Thoughts on the Saints are mediocre at best.
Mhm.
Whenever they would, some games you'd watch them, and it was one of the days that Derek Carr would just throw and would end on good numbers.
They'd end with a big win.
They'd end with a big win. And then for the rest of it, they'd almost save it. It'd be one every 4 or 5 games where they turn up, and then the rest of it they would just really be meh. Is the only way. I mean, to be fair to them, won throughout the last 5 games to put a bit of pressure on the Bucks, but it wasn't enough to pip them. But otherwise, it's just it's. Yeah, they've got pieces. I think, like Punk said, they need to build around Chris Olave and to move forward. But it'll be interesting to see what they do this offseason and where they'll end up.
Yeah, well, they've got 9 picks in the draft. 2 of them are the Denver Broncos picks, and they're 17 million in the hole in cap space. But they did sign Jameis Winston to a 1-year extension, so that's nice. We didn't think they would after what happened after the last game, but there we go.
For 70 million, they'll be able to clear pretty quickly.
Yeah, because the cap's not real, is it? So
it is when you haven't got a lot of money, and the Saints haven't got a lot of money.
They still get away with it.
We'll
have to have a conversation one day, Dave, because you do love the cap, and it doesn't seem to ever affect the Saints. So,
well, no, because they're always kicking the can down the road. And now
I was going to say, we've been saying for about 4 years
where the hell is
they're
this
kicking the can down the road. Eventually, it's going to blow up in their face, but it never does.
It is right now. There is one thing that they can do. I know we've gone over, but there is one thing that they could do which would alleviate the cap space. They could, I don't know, re-sign their quarterback to a new deal, turn it all into signing bonuses, and spread it over the course of the contract if they believe in him.
He's one of the guys that might do that, though.
His cap hit last year was only 12 million. Do you know that? That's why it's so big next year.
We're talking about another team now, because that's more than enough time on the Saints. And we're going to talk about the team that finished 3rd in the NFC South, and that was the Atlanta Falcons. 7-10 this season, 7-10 last season, but they still went up 1 position. Big changes in the front office. Only GM Terry Fontenot sticks around. Head coach now is Raheem Morris, who was the Falcons' interim head coach in 2020 and the Rams' defensive coordinator from 21 to 23. He brings in offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, who was the Rams' pass game coordinator and QB coach, so an ex-QB himself, and defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake, who was the Rams' assistant head coach and worked under Morris in Tampa. Best game, worst game, I'm taking the Week 5 win over the Texans 21-19. Desmond Ridder outdid CJ Stroud by 80 passing yards, and the Falcons scored 14 points in the fourth to come back from being 18 to 12 down against those Texans. Worst game, they gave the Commanders a win. They lost a meaningless Week 18 game in New Orleans 48-17, but the crowner for me is the Week 15 game in Carolina, where they lost 9-7 to those Panthers. So, the Atlanta Falcons, can anyone nail them down?
Worst game, I had in week 3 against Detroit. Now, the only reason being is
Really?
because, yes, they started 2-0, and this was their chance for them to prove they're a legit team. So if they'd gone 3-0, they then got momentum, and they've got 3 winnable home games against the Jags, Houston, and Washington. And I might
But
look and go, well, Houston are a lot better than
lot-
we thought. Well, that was the game that they won.
yeah,
They
but we
got
knew the Lions were a
9-7 to
legit
the
team as
Panthers.
well.
Sorry?
We knew the Lions were a legit team, and as Finn said and I said, they lost to the Panthers 9-7. So how are you arguing the Lions was the worst loss?
Because if they'd have won that game, they'd have been 3-0 going into 3 then home teams, destroyed any momentum that they had, and they had players get injured in that game as well.
What if the Lions beat the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl? But it didn't happen, did it? So, so I don't understand the argument.
Yeah, no, I think if they win that game, they go into the next 3 home games with the possibility to then become 6-0 coming out of it.
There's some games you expect to win, some games you shouldn't expect to win. They shouldn't have expected to win that game.
You're a Panthers fan.
Detroit.
You've got no idea about Steelers fan. You've got no idea about expected to win games.
Absolutely.
I'd be laughing if he was a Panthers fan.
Yeah, it's true.
Hey, Panthers won the Super Bowl more recently than I have. Oh no, got to a
Right.
Super Bowl.
Hold
got
on.
to a
What are you
Super Bowl.
talking about?
Got to a Super Bowl. I got it wrong. Got to a Super Bowl. Carry on.
Anyway, this is how bad the Falcons are. We're talking about
We've gone off tangent.
The Falcons. The Falcons.
Anything to not talk about it.
The Falcons last. It feels like the Falcons had a lost season, not through any fault of their own, but through their coaching and their coaching staff.
Yeah.
Look at that offense on paper, and look at what Bijan Robinson was doing week in, week out. And you just think, how are they losing games? What was that Panthers score?
9-7.
17-12, 9-7. How are you losing
9-7.
that game? Their defense we've maligned for years. It was a bit better last season. It wasn't great by any means, but they weren't dreadful. They weren't dreadful. I feel more confident in Atlanta taking a step forward next season with fresh coaching, some new blood in there, especially on the defensive side. I think
Depends who their quarterback is.
Well, yeah, but we'll see.
Really not.
They probably. I mean, Jim will tell me the draft capital in a minute, but I've got a sneaky feeling they'll be one of the teams looking to jump up in the draft. So I think look, at the end of the day, they could even go out and probably sign a Kirk Cousins or someone to run that offense for a few years, and it wouldn't be the end of the world. So they've got an offense. They really do. You look at Kyle Pitts, and all right, his numbers aren't jumping off the page at you, but he passes the iron smell test. Absolutely he does. Every time. I think, Dave, one of your favorite plays from this season was a one-handed catch that he made.
Yeah.
They've got players. They really have. Drake London as well looks fantastic.
That's the thing.
They have got big holes, and that's what they need to do. They need to start stuffing those holes. And I honestly think that the Falcons could jump above the Saints next year, if not at least be in contention for that division.
So, Jim, you mentioned the only person who's remaining out of the old guard is the GM. Well, if this is the roster that you can build, the GM's the first person who should have gone.
It's a good roster.
It's
a decent roster.
They have decent players, but there's huge, whopping, great big holes in that roster.
7 picks in the draft. They're picking 8th. They've got $37.5 million in cap space. Finn, anything you want to say about the Falcons before we move on?
No, in the sense that I think a lot of games, the play calling let them down. Like Punk said, a lot of the coaching but during the actual game, some of the decisions made and plays called let them down massively.
Proper.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, he's out now, so ain't got to worry about that. Not a head coach anymore. So, Before we know it, we're already at the final team for this evening, and that was the team that finished bottom of the NFC South, which is an achievement in itself. And that is the Carolina Panthers, 2-15. Last season they were 7-10, so down 2 positions from last season. As you'd expect, a massive turnaround in the front office. New GM Dan Morgan replaces Scott Fitterer. Head coach Dave Canales comes across as being the Bucs offensive coordinator. He kicked out Frank Reich, who was then replaced by Chris Tabor, special teams coach. And Brad Idzik is the new offensive coordinator. He was the Bucs wide receiver coach. So Canales getting his guy in there. But Ejiro Evero, the defensive coordinator, sticks around. So he is the same. Best game, worst game. Well, only 2 to choose from. And it has to be the Week 8 home win over the Houston Texans. There were plenty of games where the offense scored more than 15 points, but only 2 where they conceded less than 13. They ended the season with a minus 180-point differential. So I'm picking the 15-13 win over the Texans. Worst game, so much shambles here, but they finished the season with back-to-back shutouts. The Week 17 loss 26-0 at the Jags was bigger, so let's go with that one. Carolina, who wants to talk about this? Go on, Finn, have a talk about the Carolina Panthers.
Awful. Done. No.
Sandwich, is that your 2-word review of...
I don't do those sandwiches, I just do...
I mean, so do Carolina.
No, I am disappointed with Carolina.
Disappointed!
I think they made some moves in the off-season. They brought in Bryce Young, but it seemed to be a very tunneled vision approach in the sense that they went, right, let's draft Young and he will single-handedly solve all of our problems.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to worry about, giving him any options to throw to or anything like that because he's a man that can do it all. And they very quickly realised that actually, as good as he is, he can't do it all.
Best receivers now, Adam Thielen.
Exactly. They've signed a veteran receiver that had moments, but he's in terms of a rebuild, going for a veteran is never the option unless you're bringing him in for a little bit of leadership, but then you'd only sign him and you'd have people there for him to actually lead rather than him coming in and being your number 1 receiver.
Well, they drafted Jonathan Mingo in round 2, but he didn't really do anything. So they were just left with scraps.
Mm.
Someone else want to talk about the Panthers?
I'm not even sure I know what the Panthers were last season, apart from just terrible.
Chum in the water.
I mean, the defense wasn't particularly good. The offense couldn't do anything.
No.
It's very hard to dissect where the problems lie apart from the organization.
The man at the
as
top,
a whole.
Mr. Tepper.
I do wonder whether, it's all very nice having an NFL team on your CV as, you own an NFL team, but actually you do kind of need to know what you're doing as well. I don't know, man. I worry about the Panthers. I worry that they'll become who would they be like? Kind of like the Cardinals were for 20 years before Kurt Warner showed up, where every single season you can guarantee no more than 4 wins, and they'll always have a top 3-4 pick. And I wonder if they're just going to be one of those teams where they just constantly get it wrong.
You mean like the Broncos in the 2020s? Yeah.
No, I can't really use the Broncos because you have won a Super Bowl fairly recently,
and we have a go at least. I think the problem with Carolina is the fact that if you're bad, the way the NFL works is if you're like the Titans, if you're bad, you've got cap space to then be able to do something about it. They don't have cap space. They've got 12 million cap space.
It's better than some, but yeah,
it is better than some, but it's still not great. And they haven't
got a first round pick is more important.
They haven't got.
They should be picking number 1. They're not. They're picking second round.
So they don't have a first round pick, and they don't have much cap space. And if they cut players, they've just re-signed Brian Burns, I think.
The franchise tagged him.
So the franchise tagged him. He's the big guy who could have saved them a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Other than that, they're going to have to get rid of key pieces in order to save money.
CJ Henderson, DJ Chark, Frankie Luvu, all starters.
They're backed into a corner. and the only way they can get out is by selling top assets. And like, you haven't got enough to be able to get rid of your top players. Miami do that. You go, fair enough. Someone will fill his hole. That sounds weird.
What is
but
going on with
You boys,
what
honestly.
has happened to this pod? Right in the gutter. But,
1 week after I look at the state.
yeah, absolutely. There we go. Those are the 4 teams of the NFC South. Coupled with the 4 teams of the AFC South, we have finished the South. It's done. Thanks very much, guys. Next week we'll do the North. We'll do the North next week as we're working our way around the compass in the best way possible. East, South,
Jim's
North,
fashion.
and West.
The most normal way around
Yeah.
the compass.
Yeah, always.
I normally
East,
do it
South,
this way
Northwest.
myself.
That's how you should do it, right? We're gonna save the West for last. Yeah. So next week we'll do the North. In the meantime, of course, if you want to be checking out any other stuff, go on to patreon.com/finaldown, where you can read stuff that I'm producing. You might even read stuff that Punk produces every now and again, or anyone else wants to produce out of these 4.
I'll leave that with you boys, to be honest.
That sounds like he's calling you out on the podcast, lads.
Just suggested. Also, when this comes out, it's probably going to be on Thursday afternoon/evening. Mr. Finn is going to be out in London, not enjoying himself as he usually does, not with a bottle of Hennessy
I wish it was, yeah.
and a lady
Yeah,
with a
look
watch
forward to
on.
it, actually.
He's actually going to be sleeping rough in London for Land Aid. So, if anyone's
Isn't
got
that
any
just
spare
like
money,
a day ending in Y for Finn?
well, it could be. But if you want to give Finn some money for doing this, for sleeping outside in the rough, go to join.landaid.org/fundraisers/landmark2024 and put in a couple of pennies into that. So, well done, Finn.
Yes, well done, Finn.
For doing that, mate.
Thanks, chaps.
Hope it doesn't rain too much for you.
Oh,
It's not due to rain, is it?
it's not due to rain.
That
but
means
no,
it's definitely going to rain.
But knowing our luck, it's going to absolutely piss it down.
What area of London are you sleeping in?
Welcome to the UK in March. Of course, it's going to rain. Jesus.
Yeah, so what area of London are you sleeping in?
Brixton?
Shepherd's Bush.
Oh. Didn't
I thought you
fancy
were
like
saying
Staines
sticking
or
out
somewhere.
Canary Wharf somewhere.
No, Canary Wharf would have been nice, wouldn't it?
Mayfair.
Mayfair, yeah. Someone let you in.
Sleep in the Ritz doorway. There you go.
Yeah, in the Ritz.
The Statement Rhino, they're up until late.
Unlike us, we're gonna get out of here. But thank you very much, guys, for listening. Until next week, I've been Jim. That's been Punk Red. That's been Denver Dave. Thank you very much for listening.